Today, I've got a special 4th of July episode on the Great American Bash. This felt like the right time to look back at its history, not just the matches, but the buildings that hosted them. I'm focusing on larger events like the pay-per-views, so I'm skipping the 1986 and 1987 tours and also leaving out NXT. For each year, I'll start with the venue, then get into my favorite match or moment from that show. It keeps the usual Thanks for the House format, just centered on one event instead of one arena. I'm Alex. Grab a cold one, throw something on the grill, light a few sparklers, and let's celebrate one of my favorite events in wrestling history. Great American Bash started in 1985, and the idea came from who else but the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. If you're gonna build a wrestling event around summer, patriotism, fireworks, country music, stadium wrestling, and a cage match, Dusty's fingerprints are all over that. Before it settled into a regular pay-per-view format, the Bash worked more like a summer road show. It could be a stadium event, a pay-per-view anchor, or a name carried into different wrestling towns. Then the name disappeared for a couple of years, not because WCW stopped running summer pay-per-views, but because the company started leaning into the beach-themed shows. WWE brought the Great American Bash name back to pay-per-view in 2004. By then, the Crockett touring version was long gone, and WCW's run with the event had ended with the company itself. Now, let's check out that red, white, and blue list. The first Great American Bash starts at American Legion Memorial Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina, right in the middle of Crockett country. The stadium opened in 1936 as a Works Progress Administration project, and it was built as a memorial to local soldiers who had died in World War I. Holding the event outside gives it a different feel right from the opening bell. It's not the echo of a pop bouncing off steel or wood inside an arena. It's July air, stadium lights, and a Crockett crowd making noise in a place that feels more like a summer event than a regular wrestling show. The first Bash already had the weight of a Crockett supercard. Flair, Dusty, Tully, Magnum, Nikita, the Road Warriors, and the Russians were all tied into the same night, so the event immediately played like more than a one-off stadium show. It had the champions, the feuds, and the names that defined the company's peak territory era. My pick from this show has to be Dusty beating Tully Blanchard inside a cage to win the NWA World Television Championship. Dusty and Tully had already gone back and forth over that TV title earlier in the year, but Blanchard had the belt back, he had Baby Doll with him, and he had the kind of heat where the crowd didn't just want Dusty to win. They wanted Tully to get trapped in that cage with nowhere to run. Rhodes pinned him after a pile driver, and the stipulation made the loss even worse for Tully. He didn't just drop the TV title. Baby Doll had to leave with Dusty for the next 30 days, so Tully lost the belt, lost his manager, and got embarrassed on the first night of a franchise Dusty helped create. In 1988, the Bash headed further north. Baltimore Arena opened in 1962 as the Baltimore Civic Center on the site of Old Congress Hall where the Continental Congress met in 1776. By the time Crockett brought the Bash there, the building already had hosted the Baltimore Bullets, the Baltimore Clippers, boxing, concerts, and years of downtown arena traffic. The card was short, but it wasn't thin. Flair and Luger were in the world title picture, Dusty and Wyndham had the U.S. title program, and the Horsemen were all over the show. Crockett was starting to look worn down behind the scenes, but on paper, this was built like a major house in the old territory style. Here, I'm going to use the Tower of Doom match. The Road Warriors, Steve Williams, Ron and Jimmy Garvin, with Precious in their corner, of course, beating Al Perez, Ivan Koloff, Kevin Sullivan, Mike Rotunda, and the Russian Assassin. The structure is a lot to explain, but the booking is simple. Fight down through the cages and get your team out. The Tower of Doom is Crockett XS in cage match form, but the teams aren't random. Hawk and Animal give the match the power team piece it needs. Dr. Death adds another bruiser to the babyface side, and the Garvins keep the Sullivan story tied to Precious. Jimmy's team won once he got out of the bottom cage, but the match didn't stop with that result. Sullivan locked himself inside with Precious afterward, and Hawk climbing back in for the save is the part I remember. The match ends with him going back into that ridiculous structure to pull Precious away from Kevin Sullivan. Once again in Baltimore, Sting and Muta, Luger and Steamboat, War Games, and Flair vs. Funk gave 1989 one of the best Bash cards from top to bottom. For this year, I'm going with Lex Luger against Ricky Steamboat with the NWA United States Championship on the line. The story coming into this one was Luger's heel turn. At Clash of the Champions, Ricky got jumped by Terry Funk, and Luger came out like he was going to make the save, but he laid Ricky out too. So, this isn't just Steamboat chasing the US title, he's going after the guy who turned on him. Steamboat wanted a no disqualification match, but Luger threatened to walk unless the stip was dropped. Steamboat took the match anyway, and that decision gave Luger the opening he needed. The Dragon used a chair, got DQ'd, and Luger left Baltimore with the title. He didn't prove that he could beat Steamboat straight up. He kept the belt because Steamboat gave him the one mistake he needed. Baltimore got the Bash for the third straight year in 1990. The tagline was New Revolution, and the card backed it up. Vader made his WCW debut, and this ended up being the last Great American Bash under the NWA banner. WCW had the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, the Steiners, the Freebirds, Doom, Luger, and a young Mean Mark, all in the same lineup. Whatever happened to that Mean Mark guy? Did he ever turn out to be anything? My pick from this show is Sting vs. Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Sting had been forced out of the Horsemen because he wouldn't give up his title shot, then a knee injury pushed the match back even further. By the time they got to Baltimore, Sting wasn't just another challenger for the Nature Boy. He was the guy WCW had been building around, coming back for the spot he'd already earned. There wasn't much room for a Horseman escape route here. The dudes with attitudes were at ringside, and Ole Anderson was handcuffed to El Gigante. Sting won by countering the figure four into a small package. Flair went to the hold he'd used to close out challengers for years, and Sting turned it against him just long enough to get the 3 count. WCW came back to Baltimore in 1991, but without Ric Flair this time. He'd left after the Jim Herd contract dispute. The advertised match with Lex Luger was off, and Luger ended up facing Barry Windham for the vacant WCW Championship instead. This, by the way, too, was the first bash under the WCW name. Flair was gone, the world title was vacant, and the company had to push Luger and Windham into a spot that was supposed to be Flair and Luger in a cage. Around that, you had The Stinger, Nikita, Steve Austin, Diamond Stud, and Johnny B. Bad, which tells you how much WCW was throwing at the wall that summer. Don't at me in the comments, but I'm going to use Dusty Rhodes, Tracy Smothers, and Steve Armstrong, beating the fabulous Freebirds, Bad Street, Jimmy Garvin, and Michael Hayes. With the world title picture thrown together, this match gave the card a younger babyface win instead of another piece of damage control around the main event. Dustin is why I put this one on the list. The Great American Bash was Dusty's creation, and in '91, his son got the shine on a night that WCW badly needed to get through. It wasn't the biggest match in Baltimore, but it gave the night a young Rhodes beating the Freebirds instead of just being included on the card simply because he was Dusty's kid. In 1992, the Bash moved to the Albany Civic Center in Albany, Georgia. Baltimore had become the pay-per-view home of the event, but Albany gave it something closer to Crockett territory again. It was a southern building, away from the bigger wrestling cities, sitting right by the Flint River. The 92 card was shaped by the NWA World Tag Team Tournament, so it had a different rhythm than the earlier Bash versions. A lot of the night was about getting to Williams and Gordy against Windham and Dustin. My pick is going to be Vader versus Sting for the WCW Championship here. The tournament shaped the night, but Vader and the Stinger gave Albany the match that could cut through the brackets. Vader already hurt Sting earlier that year, so this didn't feel like a reigning challenger getting a shot. Sting was walking back into a fight with someone who had already done real damage. Sting ended up busted open after a second Stinger splash landed him straight on the ring post. With Harley Race in his corner, Vader took advantage when Sting made that mistake, and then finished him off with the powerbomb. Vader left Albany with the WCW title, and it was hard to argue with the result. Sting fought from underneath, missed one big shot, and Vader made him pay for it. It's 1995 now, and we're in Dayton, Ohio, as the Bash returned to Hara Arena. Hara wasn't a giant national showcase building. It was a working arena in the old sense. If you watched enough territory footage or early cable-era wrestling, you know this kind of room. It's practical, dingy, and perfect for wrestling once the lights were down. From the hard cam, you could almost see the darker corners of the arena and the lower ceiling that the building had. The card had other reset points around it too, especially Sting beating Meng for the vacant United States Championship. That gave the revived Bash a title change, while Renegade beating Arn Anderson for the TV title told you plenty about where WCW was creatively in the summer of '95. There were newer names and older territory names, all within a company trying to figure out what its next version looked like before Nitro arrived a few months later. The match I'm going to pick is Ric Flair against Randy Savage, the night's main event, and this one was personal. Nate had already dragged Randy's father, Angelo Poffo, into the feud, so Savage didn't come into this trying to out-wrestle Flair. He came in angry. Angelo's presence at ringside kept pulling the match back into family territory, and winning simply wasn't enough for Randy. After hitting that glorious top rope elbow drop, Savage pulled the Nature Boy up and accidentally created the exact opening Flair needed. Rick went after Angelo again, got a hold of the cane, and used it on Savage while the official was tied up. Flair stole the win like usual, and Randy's temper got the best of him. 1996 took the show back to Baltimore, but with it came a very different WCW. Nitro was now on the air, Hall and Nash were already causing problems, and Bash at the Beach was only a few weeks away. WCW was caught between eras. The Giant and Lex Luger repped old WCW on top, while Flair, Arn, Kevin Green, and Mongo McMichael gave the stop its Horseman/NFL crossover. The match I'm picking is Dean Malenko against Rey Mysterio for the WCW Cruiserweight title, because my love for the Cruiserweight division is certainly on the record by now. This was also Rey's WCW debut, and he immediately looked different from almost everyone else on the card. Malenko was the perfect first opponent. Rey could fly, twist, and come at him from angles WCW fans weren't used to seeing, but the Iceman kept pulling him back into one of his 1,000 holds. Rey went for the Hurricane Rana late, but Dean caught him, turned it into a powerbomb, and used the ropes for leverage to retain. In 1997, the Bash moved to the Mark of the Quad Cities in Moline, Illinois. The Quad Cities part gives the building its identity. It was built for the river market, split between Illinois and Iowa, with Moline and Rock Island on one side of the Mississippi, and Davenport and Bettendorf on the other. It didn't have Baltimore's wrestling history, but it worked for 97 WCW. This was a newer building and a smaller market, with a company hot enough to make the stop feel bigger. The card in 1997 was also WCW in the middle of the NWO boom. The Outsiders were on top of the tag division, Flair and Piper were still big enough to anchor a major program, and the company was pulling from every lane it had. The match I'm going to pick is Randy Savage against DDP in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Their feud had already given Page the biggest win of his career at Spring Stampede, and this was the rematch where Savage tried to take it back from him. Page worked like someone fighting to prove the first win wasn't a fluke. Savage worked like a man offended that Page had even beaten him at all, while Kimberly and Elizabeth gave the match the usual WCW soap opera at ringside. Savage won after Scott Hall got involved, dropping Page with the Outsider's edge before Savage finished him with the elbow. DDP lost the match, but the feud kept pushing him forward. By the end of that program with Randy, Page felt less like a popular guy with a great finish and more like one of WCW's real homegrown stars. By 1998, Baltimore had the Bash again, this time under the WCW/NWO banner. The rest of the card had that label on it, while Hogan, Piper, Savage, Goldberg, Sting, and the Giant provided the bigger names. Booker T and Chris Benoit were working a different kind of program when they faced off in the final match of their Best of 7 series on the 1998 rendition. This series of matches came out of Booker losing the TV title to Fit Finlay, with Benoit tied into the title picture and WCW turning their bad blood into a Best of 7 series. By the time they reached Baltimore, the series was tied at 3, and the winner was getting Finlay later in the night. Benoit worked Booker's leg throughout the match, which was the right target because so much of Booker's offense came from his kicks and quick bursts of energy. Late in the match, Booker finally caught him with the Harlem sidekick to win the series, then came back later in the night to beat Finlay and regain that TV title he'd been chasing. For Booker, this was another step away from being seen just as one half of Harlem Heat. He got through Benoit, got his title back, and left Baltimore with one of the stronger singles wins of his WCW run. Baltimore got the Bash again in 1999, but WCW was already showing the cracks. A new WCW logo was here, but the card leaned on old names and late 90s booking habits. Flair and Piper were fighting over power. Sting and Rick Steiner had the Falls Count Anywhere match, while Kevin Nash defended against Randy Savage, and Sid even returned at the end of the night. I'm going to use the Jersey Triad against Chris Benoit and Perry Saturn for the WCW Tag Team titles here. Those belts had already bounced from Saturn and Raven to Page and Bigelow. Canyon had slid into the Triad, and Benoit and Saturn only got the titles back on Thunder 3 days before the match. Baltimore got the rematch almost immediately. Bigelow was again at ringside, so even with Page and Canyon officially in the match, the Triad had the extra body nearby, and it was that extra body that decided it. Benoit and Saturn had the harder edge, but DDP, Kanyon, and Bigelow had the numbers. The Triad tilted the match back in their favor and left with the tag titles again. It's a new millennium now, and for the final time, the Bash returned to Baltimore in the year 2000. You could almost hear the death rattle from the gasping lungs of a company that was just playing out the string. On the card, Jeff Jarrett defended the world title against Kevin Nash. Hogan and Billy Kidman were tied up in the New Blood storyline. Ric Flair was wrestling his own son David, while Sting and Vampiro had the Human Torch match. From this event, I'm going to go with Mike Awesome against DDP in the ambulance match. Awesome had come into WCW from ECW with the Career Killer label, and the big visual leading into this was him throwing Kanyon off the triple cage of Slamboree. That pulled DDP into it because Kanyon was his guy, and Page was going after Awesome for what he did to him. Awesome powerbombed Page through a table and beat him down badly enough that the EMTs tried to stretcher him out. DDP fought back through the chair shots and splashes, even hit a top rope diamond cutter, which looked pretty damn cool, and for a second, it looked like Awesome was the one heading for the ambulance. Instead, the match turned into one of the most WCW finishes of the year. Kanyon got involved from the wheelchair, turned heel on Page, and dropped him with a diamond cutter through the stage. Awesome got the win, DDP got betrayed, and this closed the book on the Great American Bash's history in Baltimore. WWE's first version of the Bash landed under the dome at the Norfolk Scope in 2004. Norfolk Scope is one of the stranger-looking arenas in this series. 24 flying buttresses wrap around the outside, and the roof was based on the kind of concrete arena the architect had used in Rome. It was a very different setting from Baltimore. WWE's version of the Bash started with a very SmackDown 2004 card. John Cena was still rising through the US title picture, Rey and Chavo had the Cruiserweight match, and the actual main event had Undertaker dealing with the Dudleys while Paul Bearer sat inside the concrete crypt. My favorite piece of this show was JBL against Eddie Guerrero in a Texas bull rope match for the WWE Championship. Their Judgment Day match had ended with Eddie retaining by DQ, but the image that everyone remembers most was Eddie nearly resetting the Muda scale after a blade job that went sideways. This time, JBL got another shot with both men tied together by the wrist. The stipulation was perfect for their feud because Eddie couldn't just out-wrestle JBL and move on. He had to stay attached to him. Bradshaw used the rope, his size, and he powerbombed Eddie through the announce table. Guerrero kept finding ways back in, and late in the match both men had 3 corners. Eddie lunged for the 4th, hit the corner, and for a moment it looked like he'd retain the title. However, while Nick Patrick initially called it for Eddie, SmackDown GM Kurt Angle came out and reversed that decision. The replay showed JBL's shoulder hit the 4th corner before Eddie's hand, and Angle ruled that any part of the body counted. Eddie's win was taken away, and JBL left Norfolk as the WWE Champion after a dusty finish. The WWE version of the Bash moved to HSBC Arena in Buffalo in 2005. It opened in 1996 as the Marine Midland Arena, and it replaced the Buffalo Memorial Auditorium. It's a modern NHL building for the Sabres, the Buffalo Bandits, concerts, and major touring events. A weird claim to fame happened a few months after the opening of this building, when the new 8-sided scoreboard fell to the ice before a Sabres game. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but check out that picture. Buffalo's Bash card catches SmackDown in the middle of a reset. Batista had arrived from Raw with the World Heavyweight title, JBL was circling the main event scene, and Undertaker was tied to the Muhammad Hassan angle. My pick here is Rey Mysterio against Eddie Guerrero. Rey and Eddie gave the show its most personal grudge because their story had already moved past titles and into Rey's family. Earlier in the year, they'd been the WWE Tag Team Champions together, but Eddie turned on Rey. Rey kept beating him, and Eddie's obsession shifted from proving he was better in the ring to threatening Rey's family. By the time they reached Buffalo, the stipulation was simple. If Eddie won, he could reveal the secret about Rey's son Dominic. If Rey won, Eddie had to keep quiet. Eddie hit those 3 amigos and followed with the frog splash, which usually would have ended it. But when he went for the cover, Rey caught him in a cradle and stole the match back. Rey won. Eddie was supposed to lose the right to reveal the secret, but Eddie did it anyway the following week on SmackDown. In 2006, the Bash came to Conseco Fieldhouse, as it was named then, in Indianapolis. Conseco fit in with Indiana's basketball history more than almost any other modern arena could. It opened in 1999 to replace Market Square Arena, but instead of chasing the glass and steel look of a lot of NBA buildings from that era, it was designed to feel like an old field house. This is also one of my favorite arenas to catch a game in. SmackDown was in the middle of a strange summer when this pay-per-view went on the air. Rey Mysterio was World Heavyweight Champion, but King Booker was coming for the title. Batista was back from injury and got Mr. Kennedy instead of Mark Henry. Finlay defended the United States title against William Regal, and Paul London and Brian Kendrick opened the night with the tag titles against the Pitbulls. The one I keep coming back to is the Punjabi Prison match. This isn't the best match on the show, it's just the one I wanted to talk about. Khali had already beaten Undertaker at Judgment Day, so the setup was simple. Put the dead man inside a match designed around a giant who had already dropped him. But that whole card subject to change clause came into play right before the match. Big Show and Khali attacked Undertaker backstage, so SmackDown GM Teddy Long pulled Khali from the match and named Big Show the replacement. Structurally, this thing looked like a nightmare to work in. The inner cage had 4 doors that only opened for 60 seconds before they were locked for good, and the outer cage had no doors at all. In storyline, the Great Khali brought the Punjabi Prison match to WWE, but behind the scenes, it came out of creative, with Court Bauer later saying his original cage match pitch turned into the bamboo prison we got at the Bash. Undertaker escaped the inner prison first, but Big Show caught him between the cages and threw him through a table. Late in the match, Show caught Taker in midair and threw him into the outer wall. The bamboo gave way, Taker crashed through it, and because he hit the floor first, he won the match. Thankfully, like some other gimmick matches, this one never became its own pay-per-view. In 2007, the Bash headed out west to the HP Pavilion in San Jose, California. Nicknamed the Shark Tank, it opened in 1993 as San Jose Arena after the city pushed for a downtown building, and the NHL gave San Jose the Sharks franchise. By the time WWE brought the Bash there, the arena had already gone from San Jose Arena to the Compaq Center to the HP Pavilion now, which does feel very early 2000s Silicon Valley in the most literal way possible. This was also the first WWE version of the Bash after the brand-exclusive pay-per-views had ended. So, Raw, SmackDown, and ECW were all on the same card. Cena and Lashley had the WWE title main event, Khali defended the World Heavyweight title against the Animal Batista and Kane, and John Morrison defended the ECW title against CM Punk. The match I'm picking is Randy Orton against Dusty Rhodes in a Texas Bull Rope match. There's something fitting about Dusty being here in 2007. He helped create the Bash in the Crockett days, and more than 20 years later, he was back under the same name for his final Great American Bash match. Orton was deep into the Legend Killer gimmick by this point, and Dusty gave him a different kind of target. This wasn't Orton going after a legend in a nostalgia segment. Cody Rhodes had just started appearing on Raw. Orton made it personal by putting his hands on the American Dream. A bull rope match belonged to Dusty's world. Both men were tied together by the bull rope, with the cowbell hanging in the middle, so Orton couldn't just wrestle his usual match. Dusty started with elbows, used the rope, and got a few moments where the match was on his terms. Then, Orton turned the cowbell into the weapon. He hit Dusty in the head with it repeatedly, and then used one final shot to put him down and get the pin. After the match, Orton tried to punt Dusty, but Cody ran in to stop it. Dusty lost, but the match put Cody directly into Orton's path. For Orton, beating Dusty in a match tied to Dusty's own history was exactly the kind of thing the Legend Killer character was built to do. WWE took the 2008 Bash to the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum on Long Island. Opening in 1972 on part of the old Mitchell Field property, a former military airfield, the Coliseum became famous as the Islanders' home during their Stanley Cup dynasty in the early 1980s. But even with that history, the building always had more of an old barn feel. Triple H and Edge were on top here with the WWE title. Punk and Batista faced each other for the world title, while Cena and JBL brawled in a parking lot. This is also the event that Michelle McCool became the first Divas champion. Here, I'm going to go with Chris Jericho against Shawn Michaels. Their story had started with Jericho accusing Shawn of being a hypocrite, and then Jericho shoved Michaels face first into the Jeritron on the highlight reel that left the Heartbreak Kid with an injured eye. Jericho kept targeting Shawn's eye during the match. Lance Cade got involved when referee Marty Elias was tied up checking on the damage, and Shawn kept trying to fight through it instead of letting the officials stop the match. Jericho caught him with an elbow that opened the eye up again, and then he kept punching at the cut until Elias stepped in and stopped it, giving Y2J the win. In 2009, we're at the Arco Arena in Sacramento, California, but this time WWE only referred to the event officially as The Bash. That name change always bothered me, honestly. Taking Great American off the front stripped away part of the show's identity. The colors, the patriotic branding, the old Crockett connection, the red, white, and blue graphics, all of that gave the event a specific flavor. Calling it The Bash kept the lineage on paper, but it made the name sound generic as hell. Arco was the King's building, but it never had the downtown shine of a lot of the NBA arenas. Fans called it the Old Barn, and it had a reputation for being loud, cramped, and plain in a way that helped the atmosphere. WWE threw a lot at the wall in 2009. Orton and Triple H had a great 3 stages of Hell match in the main event. Rey and Jericho had a mask versus title match, and ECW was still hanging around through Tommy Dreamer. For the final pay-per-view stop, my pick is Jeff Hardy against CM Punk for the World Heavyweight Championship. Punk had cashed in Money in the Bank on Hardy right after Jeff beat Edge in a ladder match at Extreme Rules, so Jeff wasn't chasing a cold title shot. He was chasing the belt Punk took from him before he could even enjoy winning it. Hardy thought he had Punk beaten, but referee Scott Armstrong saw Punk's foot under the bottom rope and restarted the match as Hardy went for the cover. Punk was also selling an eye injury, and after the restart, he kicked Armstrong in the back. Hardy won by DQ, but Punk kept the title. The finish gave Jeff nothing. He had the visual pin, he had the crowd thinking the title was coming back, and even then, Punk left with the belt. And that bell brings us to the end of the Great American Bash. This event always had a look and feel that stood out to me. The stage designs, the red, white, and blue graphics, the colors, the patriotic branding, even the name itself. The presentation gave the Bash a summer wrestling identity before the first match even started, and that's the version of the show I miss. That's all for this special holiday episode. You all be safe with the fireworks. In the meantime, let me know your favorite Great American Bash moment down in the comments. Thanks for the house.